Mary is the Executive Officer of the Western Sydney Community Forum and has worked in the community sector for over 30 years, including 25 years in our Blue Mountains, which we are, so grateful for. She has worked as a manager of Katoomba Neighbourhood Centre and Mountains Community Resource Network. She was a founding member of the Stronger Families Alliance and is deeply involved in the evolution of the Sydney Alliance. She's in a really good position to reflect on the successes and struggles in our work, having had much opportunity to observe the wide range of multiplier outcomes from many collaborative projects. Would you please welcome Mary?
Thanks, Di, and thank you. Wow, what an amazing lot of speakers we've had here and ideas, and I just want to thank Ross and Fiona and Sam and Kate and Tanya and people like them who have the, in jobs where they are able to think, and they're able to think about the sort of systems that we're working in, and they're able to translate that into presentations that we can get some understanding and be guided somewhat by. It's reassuring to know that people are out there using all of their intelligence, because mostly here in the sector we're scrambling from thing to thing, multitasking, and not really able to use the best of our experience and our brains and our focus. Mostly we're working on the back of our experience, and that can be really good, and it also can be really flawed. So I'd just like to really applaud your work and encourage you to continue doing that. I've got a scramble of notes here, so I'm going all over the place. But Ross said systems trump programs every time. And, that's really key at the moment. We're working currently in a context of changing and unknown funding systems, of competitive tendering, of a lack of resources, of multiple agendas and pressures, of no real investment in real early intervention. There's some investment in late intervention. So all of these change processes that we're trying to do are actually being squeezed into tiny little spaces because of that, the system that we're working in. And so we need to, at the same, when we're sitting here overwhelmed by, oh my goodness, we should be doing all these things differently, think about it in the context of that, and be impressed that we are actually continuing to think and continuing to be here in the space. So my story, or my job here today, is to put things into a bit of a context of both the community work sector, which I have a long history in, and also into the Western Sydney context. I've been asked to talk about some of my personal projects that I've been worked in, as well as some strategies that we're doing at the moment in Western Sydney, and to identify some of the strategies that work, what it takes personally, professionally and organisationally to work in collaboration, and some essential practices for systems leadership. So I hope I'm able to do that. And I don't have a PowerPoint. So my first job was a childcare worker in a women's refuge in the mid-70s. It was a very different context. There were no working with children checks or that sort of thing. There weren't even seatbelts. In fact, I can remember putting 10 kids in the back of an escort van and taking them to the beach, me on my own. There was no sort of sense of duty of care. But we were changing the world. We were breaking down the systems that distinguished the women who came to the refuge's experience and the women who worked in the refuge experience, and often women left the refuge and came and worked in the refuge. And so it's a really different context to the one that we're working in today. The personal is political was our byline, and we were a collective, and I'll come back to that word collective. At Katoomba Neighbourhood Centre, I oversaw the management of Katoomba Children's Cottage, which I think still is one of the best children's services in the world, and I'm privileged to work with a number of young people who went to childcare there, and I bet there's lots of people in this room whose kids went there. I also oversaw the development of the Michaela Occasional Care Centre from the kind of a parents' cooperative wanting occasional care so they could go to TAFE to the building of that to that wonderful centre now, when the builders went broke halfway through and council came to our rescue and took over the project management, and it's now a great thriving service. I worked in Central Australia for a little while developing resources for remote Aboriginal communities in the childcare space, and just a few weeks ago we were travelling through Yuwindamu, and I was thrilled to see one of the childcare centres that I was involved in the early stages of it is actually up and running, and apparently or reportedly a great resource in that community. I was there at the beginning of Families First, which is now Families New South Wales, which, the all-of-government approach which was going to change the world again. And as Di introduced me, I was, when I was a manager at Mountains Community Resource Network and working with Families New South Wales, I had the privilege of working with Tanya in the early days of the Stronger Families Alliance, where Tanya and I had this little plan about how we'd involve people, and we asked key leaders in the Blue Mountains to commit themselves to coming to 3 meetings. That was in 2006, 2005, and a number of people have been to considerably more meetings. So I've seen many strategies over the years, in the child and family space and in a bigger sort of space than that. And, so what I'm going to talk about is a bit of some of the things that are currently happening and a bit of a reflection on what I see are the key things at work. So, I want to talk about a couple of coalitions that we're currently working with. One is the Sydney Alliance, which is an alliance of faith-based organisations, unions and community organisations coming together to be a voice for the common good in Sydney. So all of them partner-based, membership-based organisations, all of them having a concern that the voice of the people is not being heard, that the voice of the market is too big, and also the short-termness of politics, the 3-year cycle of people needing to get re-elected is leading to really poor decision-making. So we're 48 member organisations, really big organisations and really small organisations. We've got members like the Catholic Church and the Uniting Church, Unions New South Wales, and a whole range of unions from United Voice to the Bus, Tram and Rail Union, the United Services Union that covers councils, a whole range of different unions. We've got the Jewish Board of Deputies, the Arab Council Australia, Asian Women at Work, Western Sydney Community Forum, and a whole range of... So a whole lot of us together that have created and are creating a template for an alliance which is unified, which is diverse, and which is united. So we're working on the issues that unite us, not the issues that divide us. We're focusing on Sydney, and we're focusing on being a voice of the people. And it's a two-level, or it's a multi-level sort of strategy, but it's a level of leaders, but it's also very much a level of members. And so we've done a whole process of listening across Sydney to the sorts of issues that people are really concerned about, and drawing our agenda from that, because the premise is that people will commit themselves to the things that are really important to them. While lots of people might care about an issue such as, I'm just trying to think of one, what colour the Harbour Bridge is painted, they won't necessarily be prepared to put their weekends or evenings into making sure that happens. So the issues that have, through 6,000 conversations across Sydney, that people have said that they really care about are better transport systems, affordable housing, and better opportunities for marginalised young people in work. And so they're the three issues that we're working on. And I can talk about Sydney Alliance for a very long time, but I'll cut that short. But some of the attributes, I've only got 10 minutes, about it is that it has a youth leadership program, so it's really incorporating young people, building their skills in this thing, and it's really, the partner organisation's interest in it is that it's really assisting them to develop their own organisations as well, and furthering the agendas of those organisations. So it's about self-interest. I'll just briefly mention another few strategies that we're working on so that I've got time to talk about the things that are important. But almost an opposite strategy to that is the Western Sydney Leadership Institute that's recently formed that we've been asked to be part of, which is it's an elitist, select group of people who are interested in Western Sydney. So it's mainly businesses, but it's also the University of Western Sydney. It's partners like Wesrock and ourselves, and it's a group of people coming together to think about how we get the best for Western Sydney in what sorts of ways. And both of those strategies are really about using the relational power of the members. So they're about who knows who has connections with who, and building trust between the individuals involved, so that when things get a bit tough, that trust and that knowing of each other and knowing about each other's motivations carries people through the difficult situations. Another strategy that you're going to be hearing a lot more about is the collective, which is a new facts strategy of bringing government, community and business together with the aim of engaging, and I'll just read this, engaging the business sector in local community in a meaningful way, creating a central point where cross-sector partnerships can go for more support and increased collaboration. It focuses on supporting small and unfunded projects. FACS is providing the backbone with community, and Western Sydney Community Forum is a key partner in this, assisting them to make the links into communities. So it's part of their localisation structure. There'll be one in Western Sydney, there'll be one in Nepean and Blue Mountains and one in southwest Sydney. FACS see it as a collective impact project. For me, it's just really interesting that it's called a collective at this time when, going back to my roots of the women's refuge collectives and the lack of success in those services in gaining tenders in the specialist homelessness space. It's an interesting use of language. So I've got another couple of examples, but I won't go into those because I want to talk about some of the common and powerful strategies that work in collaboration. So the first one is, and everyone's talked about this, it's about relationships of trust. It's and that's a continual process. You don't just have a relationship and then you can you move on. It's about understanding each other's motivation and what strongly drives your organisation to want to have change. It's about longevity often. It's about the it's about it's about people, basically. It's really about people, and it's something that's very, very difficult to duplicate by having memorandums of understanding and that sort of thing, because when people leave projects, it's not that easy just to say, well, we've got that relationship, those two organisations have that relationship. So, it's really about the people and the individuals who carry those relationships. The next thing I want to make a point about is in a important part of collaboration is having a clear sense of purpose, which has to be a big picture, a visionary sort of purpose, but at the same time it has to be simple and it has to be able to be broken down into the everyday. The example I'll use is kids going to school ready to learn, that we've talked about quite a bit. It's, you know, it's a clear goal, but it has flexibility about how that might happen. The third thing about collaboration is about being in there for the long haul. Things take a long time to develop. They, you know, the projects I was talking about, the Uwindamu Childcare Centre, Michaela Occasional Care, the Stronger Families Alliance, they're 10-year projects. They're not something that you can do in a short-term funding cycle, and they're not something that you can kind of dip in and then say, well, that's done. They're long-term projects, and they're also never finish. Then the other point we've talked about quite a lot is the need for leadership, and you know, poor Tanya, we're talking about you all the time, but you know, it's very clear in the Stronger Families Alliance, the quality of your leadership in this and your ability to stay on track and to really keep thinking about it has been key to that. However, we can, you know, it's also really important that we don't leave leaders there on their own, and that the whole, you know, things collapse because a particular person is taken out of the story. But yes, leadership is a really important thing, and so also is secretarial sort of backup, because you know, that whole thing about keeping people engaged in processes is about keeping them informed, about sending minutes, about reminders, all of that sort of thing. And it's without that kind of physical resource, then things flounder. So what does it take to, on a personal, professional, organisational level, to be a serious and committed collaborator? The first thing that came to my mind is self-interest. There has to be a sense that this project is going to drive your own personal goals and the organisational goals of your agency further. That you know, it's so we all have huge workloads. We all would really like to just stay at our desk and finish the multitude of emails and things that are coming at us. It's very important that the project, you know, the collaboration that you're working on, you have a sense that being involved in it is actually going to move things forward in a way that that you can be tempted away from your desk to keep doing. So you have to have a clear sense of of your own self-interest and your own organisational interest in a project. You need to have organisational buy-in at all levels. You need, you know, your boards or your management committees, other staff, and you're all kind of knowing and you know, have that sort of sense of your organisational commitment to that. And that's a job that's never finished. I'll say, you know, in my own organisation, I'm struggling at the moment because for just different reasons, 4 board members are leaving. You know, one's going to live in Jindabyne, one's going to work in Africa, one's left her job, and someone else has gone to work for government. And so it sort of feels like, oh, you're continually starting over again to build that sense of organisational commitment to a particular strategy. And I'm sure it's the same in council and government departments. You've really got to continually work on that. And that takes a lot of patience, and it takes a lot of strategy. You've got to be able to keep your eye on the bigger goals, as well as have short-term wins that demonstrate to the organisation that it's worth keeping doing it. As Tanya said in her speech, there's no they out there that's going to fix things. It's us, and you've got to have that, you know, keep maintaining that sense. And then the other point I want to make is that the importance of empathy and of keeping your heart in projects, because, you know, that's really where, if our heart isn't embedded in the work that we're doing, and if we don't really have a sense of the struggles of other people and why we're doing it, then we get very critical and very kind of, if only they would do this, or it's their fault sort of thing. So Auntie Sharon in her welcome this morning was talking about the whole thing about keeping our eye out, you know, keeping our focus really on the local Aboriginal kids, and that's a really important part of that. So just speeding through now to keep Chris happy. 3 essential practices for systems leaders. 1, vision, being there for the long haul, having the ability to stand in the tension and the pushback and keep the larger picture in mind all the time. You've got to, you've got to have ambitious targets for your project. Grit and determination, it requires an ability to hold risk over a long period of time for the sort of investment you're putting into these projects, and that comes, that's a hard thing to do. Shared ownership, putting your energy where it can be, making sure that everybody shares that kind of sense of whether it's leadership or supporting leadership. And then the last point I wanted to make is about serious succession planning. In every one of the strategies I've mentioned, there's somebody like Tanya who really has held the vision, who has an ability to articulate where we're going, who's kind of being hugely ambitious about what's possible and has known that what we're doing isn't working and that we need to do it in a different way. If we don't have some, serious discussion about succession planning, then there's a risk that we lose a lot of that when you take any one of those people out of the picture. So, on that note, we'll finish.